The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. So thrilled to be here with you on this Thursday morning. We're going to be here live for the next 2 hours talking about autism from a 360-degree perspective. Wherever you are in this community, you have different things that you're dealing with. All of us are individuals. Every person who has a diagnosis of autism is very much an individual. So there is no one size fits all, but there are things that we can be talking about that hopefully can help you to get further on the path that you're trying to head down. And that's really what this entire show is meant to be. It is absolutely interactive, this show, and we can only do that with your help. So Emily's going to cycle through some of the different ways that you can get in touch with us here. I'm going to remind you, if you go to our homepage, which is autism-live.com, when you go there, it's a desktop with a computer screen on it. There is a little triangle usually on that computer screen. Click on that triangle and you can be watching the live show if it's the right window of time, or you can be watching the most recently recorded live show. And you can also cycle through and pick if there's a show that you want to go back to, the recently recorded shows. But I want to point out that there are a lot of other things that happen on that page. You can connect with our blog on that page. And also there is that long, skinny white box. That is your interactive tool. It's completely free. And if you put your cursor there and type away, you hit enter, and it will show up on my screen within about a minute. And when we're live, that gives you the opportunity to not only talk to me, but to talk to our guests that we have in the show. We have a wide array of experts and other parents that we have on the show, and we can share information. I do like to remind you that there is never anyone on the show who can, myself especially, but none of our experts can give you child-specific or individual-specific advice, right? This format doesn't allow enough information to be able to say, hey, this is what this person needs. But it can really help you to know what kinds of questions, what resources you want to go to begin to look at what's happening in a different way, so that you can problem solve and get to that progress, because progress is the name of the game, right? So we encourage you to participate on that live feature and write into us. By the way, that feature is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so you don't have to be watching the live show. The only thing I would caution you is that when you're making comments, make sure that they're as specific as possible about what it is you're wanting. If you're watching an interview and you say, you know, what is she talking about? I want to know more about this. I missed the thing that she mentioned about the website, right? I have no idea which she you were watching and what website she was talking about. So give me as many clues as you can. I always like to say that I gave up mind reading to be an autism mom. So help me out. And let me know what you're talking about. I know in the moment, for you, it's happening live, but if it isn't the live show, you got to be as specific as possible. By the way, the live show is 10 a.m. to noon Pacific Standard Time, and that translates to 1 to 3 Eastern Standard Time in the United States. And unfortunately, because I'm not good at math, I'll ask you to do the math wherever you are in the world. We're seen in over 103 countries, so I know you got a lot of time zones that you got to juggle there. But if you do the math, and then you'll know exactly when you can see us live. I know in Africa, you guys are watching us at night, and we love that. I just find that very fascinating. So in any case, we're excited to be here. I always like to remind you at the start of the show that I am not an expert in autism, and never do I want to pretend to be. And when I'm a parent, and my son is now 10 and a half, and there are times that you guys ask me questions about my son, and there are times when I will talk about him, but I want to remind you that I never mean to compare my child to yours, because that's, if it seems like that's what I'm doing, I assure you that is not my intention, because our kids are all different. Their outcomes are going to be different. What they start with is going to be different. And we can't judge our kids by each other. It's hard not to, right? But we must do that. But I can tell you that having been on this journey now for 8 years, we just had I won't say celebrated, had the anniversary of when my child was diagnosed 8 years ago this week. And that's a drop in the bucket for some of you who are watching. A drop in the bucket, that's a blip in time. I think about Liz Becker, who we had on the show last week, whose son was turning 27. And the footsteps that she has made, that I certainly have followed in, and some of you are true pioneers. And I know that 8 years is a drop in the bucket. But we all have something to share on this journey, some strength, some wisdom, some hope, that and I firmly believe, and I always say to you guys, that together we can solve whatever issue there is and get to progress, right? Progress is it, and progress is relative for all of us. What is, exciting to you to have accomplished, maybe, isn't to somebody else, but that's not the game. We're individuals. So we work towards progress, and that is the name of the game. All right. I feel like I've left something out, but I don't think I have. I want to get started because we have a lot of exciting things happening today here on the show. We always like to start the morning with something I call the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to make sense of it, give you and learn as we're making sense of it. So first we're going to give you the term, then we're going to give you the actual definition that is often in such convoluted, deeper jargon that we just want to run into the streets with our hair on fire. But we don't. We stick around, because then we give you the working definition, which makes our BCBAs break out into hives sometimes, but we have to get a working understanding, right? So today's term, shaping, and we're not talking about, those fabulous undergarments that suck us in, right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about something entirely different. So our actual definition here, a teaching technique used to teach an unknown skill. Great, I like it. The individual is rewarded for successful approximation of a targeted skill. Gradually, the reinforcement is given only as the approximation gets closer to the target skill. Okay, now, I consider myself an intelligent woman. I have a master's degree. And I remember when they used to talk about this, and they would say, oh, we're just going to reward the approximation. And I would go, all right, I'm sure that I should know what that means. I'm sure that I should know what that looks like, but help me out. What are you talking about? So our working definition for this, a procedure for teaching a behavior sequence where the child masters one step at a time while the teacher completes the remaining steps until the child has mastered all the steps in the chain, is completing the whole sequence independently. I feel like that was our definition for chaining. Because shaping, so I feel like we have the wrong definition up there. Forgive us, because sometimes I don't take care of the slide progression. But shaping is when, imagine that you want to be able to do something, right? But you're not going to be able to do the whole thing today. There's no possibility that you can do the whole thing today. Maybe I want to do a chin-up, and for me today, that is not going to be possible. I weigh too much, and I don't have the arm strength to be able to do that. So do I just say, it's not happening, forget it, let it go? Well, if I really need to learn how to do a chin-up, or I really want to learn how to do a chin-up, I got to start somewhere. So maybe I get a trainer, and the trainer says, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start, and you're just going to hang on the bar. And we're going to see if you can support your own weight for 5 seconds with your hands on the bar. And if you do that, that's going to be great for today because we're working towards building up the strength to be able to do this chin up. Now, I'm not a trainer, so I don't know what the progression is for shaping up this behavior, but that's what the trainer would do, would be to shape up that behavior. We never give up and go, that's just not going to happen. But the trainer would make sure to reward me for that approximation, the thing that I did that is like one little millistep on the road towards being able to do it. Because eventually I'm going to get to the point where, you know, he's going to have me pull up just a little bit and he's going to reward me then. And then when I get it so that my eye level is at the chin bar, he's going to really reward me because eventually I'm going to get to the point where I get my chin over that bar. But if I start out and I only get a reward for getting the chin over the bar, am I going to stick it out? This is the whole problem with New Year's resolutions, right? We say, well, I want to be able to do this, but it takes a lot of steps to get there. And if we don't find it rewarding enough in order to get there, we're really not going to do it. Same thing with anybody, right? Doesn't matter whether you're on the autism spectrum or not. There's just some stuff that's really difficult and outside your grasp, but we can shape up a behavior. We start with the block of clay, right? And we're not going to have the expectation that we're going to get the beautiful, sculpture in the first day. So we start shaping it and we see that we're going to make, a bust of a head and we're gently shaping. Same thing with the behavior, but we're making sure that we're headed in a direction that's going to help to build the skills and rewarding, that yes, that's really starting to take shape and look like the bust. That's really starting to move towards the direction of looking like the skill that we're trying to create. I always go back to that video that we showed probably over a year ago, the great TED Talk. You can find it online. We love TED Talks here. The dad who was able to, as part of a research grant, he wired up his whole house so that from the first moment that he brought his baby home, they videotaped every second, because there were cameras embedded all over the wall, every second of this child's life for his first 5 years. And at one point they take and they squish every single incident of where he says water from the first time that he goes blah, blah, to the time that he says water, right? And they condense it into 30 seconds. And it's amazing. If you want to get a great view of what shaping looks like, because he goes water, right? It's fascinating, but that's shaping up being able to say water. And we're going to be talking about this specifically with one of our guests today about how we shape behavior, what it looks like and what kinds of behaviors we want to shape and how we implement that, because it's a fascinating teaching tool. Okay, moving on, we have our question of the day. And our question goes hand in hand with this jargon. What skill would you like to improve? Because this shaping, whether you are an individual who's on the spectrum or you're an individual who's not on the spectrum, there might be something that you want to get better at. And is there a way that we can shape this behavior up in you? Or is there a skill that your child, you just wish that they were doing better? How can we shape this behavior up and get it to look closer to the targeted behavior that we want to do? So we will see if we can find some time a little bit later on Facebook. I always encourage you to post your answers on Facebook, because not only do you get to express yourself, and why do I always quote Dr. Phil? I'm not a huge Dr. Phil fan, but Dr. Phil says you have to name it to claim it, right? And if you want to be able, I was watching just a couple of minutes of the Today Show this morning and they were showing the girls. I did not realize that Sochi is the first Olympics that women get to do ski jumping. Is that serious? We're in 2014, and this is the first time that women get to do the ski jump. I am appalled that we are, but I'm thrilled that it's finally happening. But they were showing this one girl who's going to be in the Olympics, and they had video of her when she was 7, that Matt Lauer was there and interviewing and talking about the girls who were learning this. She was 7 years old. There wasn't an Olympic sport then, but they were shaping up that behavior with her, right? And it was just fascinating to me to see how they, take a 7-year-old and work towards getting to the point where they can do the Olympics. Truly, truly amazing. So whatever the skill is that you want to do, if you're sitting there thinking, gee, I'd like to do that, I think it would be fun to feel the feeling of that, but I'm afraid I would freak out in midair. I'm sure that would be part of the shaping process, to make you calm while you're in midair. But if there's something that you want to do, or you want to do better, or there's something that your child wants to do, or that you want your child to do, can we shape it up? So name it, claim it is where I started off. So if you want to be able to do a skill, claim it. Name it and claim it on Facebook. Say that you're going to do it. But also, when you write these things on Facebook, it helps to inspire other people to go, I used to want to do that. I forgot all about that. Maybe I'll do that, right? It puts some light in other people's lives. It's a really great thing. It's why we should use the internet. All right. So that's our question of the day. We always have a topic of the week. And our topic this week is all about skill building and about making progress. We're calling it chunk it. When something is overwhelming, whatever it is, it's that you have, it's tax season time now, right? By next week, we're going to have all of our forms from all of our employers. It's, and you've got all this time to do it until April 15th. It's going to hang over all of our heads. We don't have to take the whole thing on at once. We can chunk it. We can say, I'm just going to get the paperwork together today. That's all I'm going to do. If it's a skill that we're trying to teach our child, we're going to chunk it and do it in different increments, because everything is easier when we chunk it. We're not talking about jewelry here. We're talking about life. But we're going to chunk it. Okay, so to that end, some of the different things we're going to have during the show. We got a really exciting show. I love Thursdays. So in just a few minutes, Real Progress with Dr. Adel. I've asked her to come in and talk about shaping and chaining and how we use these things. What skill would we decide to shape, and how we can be effective as a parent or as a teacher to actually shape things. Then, right before the top of the hour at 10:50 Pacific time, we're going to have Shannon Des Roches Rosa. We've had her before on the show. She is an awesome mom, very prolific, and I just don't know how she does all the things that she does. I believe there's 4 children, right? But 1 on the spectrum, and she has her own blog, which is Squidlicious. She is a blogger for Blog Her. She speaks frequently around the world, is one of the contributing editors to Thinking Person's Guide to Autism, both the website and the book, and has been involved with multiple other books. A really amazing, great resource. Someone who is not a stranger to controversy, and if we have the opportunity, we'll talk with her a little bit about some of the controversy surrounding the Thinking Person's Guide to Autism, because I'd love to get her take on that. But really a beautiful writer and an awesome autism mom. So we're looking forward to talking with her. Again, her blog is Squidalicious. I like that. And she also is one of the editors for the Thinking Person's Guide to Autism. And then in the second hour, of course, we have Dr. Jonathan Tarbox here for Science Beat. We're going to be asking him to talk a little bit more about those wandering, eloping, and bolting moments with children, and some science behind, what works, what's effective, how do we take charge and lessen the likelihood that our children are going to run. You guys continue to write into me about the heartbreak that we are all feeling this week about Avonte Oquendo and how devastating this must be for his family, and how horrible it is for a community. And I always like to say that life is filled with lessons. And unfortunately, the devastating truth is that sometimes you are the lesson, and other times when you're not the lesson, your responsibility is to learn and to grow. And I know all of us on Tuesday night, when the report came back that the remains were Avonte's, we all went home and hugged our children a little closer. And we all felt, you guys are writing into me overwhelming, this responsibility of, I have to do better. I have to do better, and I have to help my child, and I have to help my community so that these kinds of things can't happen. So we're going to ask Dr. Tarbox for some help in understanding these things and getting to a better place with them. How do we treat these things? All right, so all of that and ever so much more, including your questions. We've got already 2 questions specifically for Dr. Tarbox on here that I'm excited to have him answer today, and much more, so stick with us.
Hello, fellow activists. Let's talk about step 6, live in gratitude and give back. Have you ever noticed that it's impossible to feel sorry for yourself when you focus on your blessings? I have an exercise for you. Take out 5 pennies. I want each penny to represent something you're thankful for today. Now, I bet not one of those pennies represented something material, but that every one of them represented someone you love or a moment you shared with that someone.
Go through life parched and empty, standing knee deep in a river and dying of thirst.
There's a song by Kathy Mattea called Standing Knee Deep in a River and Dying of Thirst. Sometimes we need to look at the river of blessings flowing underneath us, and then we see we're not so thirsty after all. Once you realize how fortunate you are, you can freely give back to others, and there's nothing that will make you feel more fortunate than giving to those less fortunate than you. So start your day with an attitude of gratitude, and until next time, keep the faith.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. I want to take a quick second to address some of the questions that you guys have written in yesterday. The first one you guys asked, hey, Autism Live, just asking, is there anything that we can do to help the family with their loss? I know you're talking about Avonte Oquendo, and it's something that we're aware of. One of the things that the special education attorney that we had on the show yesterday said, that there is a lawyer, and I'm sure that there is a legal fund that has already been set up. So we've put out some feelers to see if there's a place, and if we get an address for you that you can donate to their legal fund. I would remind all of us that, while I hate to think that it's all about legal things at this point and that we live in such a litigious society, I personally am cheering this family on to follow through in this difficult time and to sue, because a lot of times that is what makes a difference with huge organizations, and schools tend to be huge organizations, that when they feel it monetarily, they will get behind changing things. And we know that there are things that could have been different in that school. So that's one of the things that we're aware of the potential of. We're finding an address for you. But if there is something else that we hear that the family needs, we will, of course, post that on our Facebook. You can watch for it there, and we'll talk about it here on the show. We are also in the middle of our Blog-AU-Rama, AU-Rama month here, where we're featuring blogs. That's one of the reasons why we're having Shannon Des Roches Rosa with us a little bit later. And we had the fabulous Tom Hibben from Adventures in Asperger's on the show. Somebody wrote in and said, are we having the Autism Daddy on this month? And they were writing that they really enjoy reading that blog, and we enjoy reading that blog as well. The invitation is out. In the past, we had a date booked, but as you know, if you read the Autism Daddy blog, that there is a very big deal about anonymity, and a lot of our bloggers don't use their real name, and some of them don't do interviews. Some of my favorite blogs are people who will not come on the show and reveal who they are, and we respect that. So So, you know, when the Autism Daddy is ready to have his face seen, we will have him here on the show. We have said to bloggers in the past, and we continue to say this now, that if they want to be on and just be on the phone and we'll show pictures from their blogs, we're willing to do that as well. But it is important that, and we can all appreciate this, right, in this community, that everybody's anonymity stretches to a different thing. My son, it loves the attention of when we're someplace and people know who he is. He just thinks it's fabulous. When he was 5 and I asked him what he wanted to do on a Saturday, he said, I'd like to go sit someplace and just sign my autograph for people. I don't know where that comes from. But some kids are not that way, right? And, you know, and I'm fortunate that my husband is lovely and doesn't mind me talking about, you know, the vast majority of the things that I talk about on the show. There are times when I think I cross the line a little bit, right? And I got to be careful. You know, sometimes the spouse says, I don't want our business on the streets and I want you to have an outlet, but, you know, there's a limit. So we're respectful of that. But when Autism Daddy is ready, the invitation is there and he knows that. So we'll keep you posted on that. Also, somebody had written in about the Disney Pass. How is the new Disney Fast Pass working for autistic kids? And I would tell you that I have heard both sides of the story. I have heard people who have said, you know what? It's not my favorite thing. It works different, but we're making it work, right? Because it's Disney and we need to make it work. And I've heard other people who have said that it's made it so that they really can't go in the way that they used to. I have a tickle, excuse me. And that they're hoping that as their children get better, that they'll be able to go in the future. What I'm hearing from parents is that it really depends on the day. If it's a very, very busy day, like weekends, it's much harder. But that during the weekdays, it's not as bad. Now, you know, everybody's going to have a different experience. So that's what we've been hearing so far. Disney's still looking at it. We hope that they're going to perfect it and, you know, and work on it a little bit so that there'll be access for everyone. For those families that have said to us, we just can't go right now. Our child isn't well enough to go, that Disney will accommodate. And they have in the past said that they will continue to work on it until everyone can come. And we hope and pray that that's true. Okay, so just wanted to get to some of those questions because they were all good questions. And by the way, somebody else had written in and said that they really want us to have a doctor nutritionist on the show to explain all the diets that are out there because it's so confusing and we've got some feelers out. I know we've asked Julie Matthews from, my gosh, my head, from Nourishing Hope. Yes. Awesome site filled with great information. We've reached out to Julie to see if she can join us via Skype to shed a little light on the subject of all the different diets that are out there and what might be of interest to any of you that are out there. All right, we are going to take a break and we're going to be back with Dr. Adel Najdowski, so stick with us.
When you find out you're having a boy, you always think like, oh, he's going to play football, he's going to do this and that. And then when he's diagnosed, all those things get washed away.
It's like that piece that's always in the back of your mind, you know, where is he, what is he doing, is he safe?
We really didn't know what we were dealing with. I wish that they could have directed me a little bit more and provided me some information.
I was a young mom. I didn't know what it was like to raise a boy, despite a boy with autism.
Hundreds of thousands of families are not getting the help they need for their children with autism all around the country. ACT Today is determined to bridge the gap. These families really have to go through a lot to get a grant. The application process isn't easy. The records, the diagnosis proof, they're really battling for their kids. So when we can give them a grant, it is so wonderful to see that they succeed in getting that help for their children. Our founder, Dr. Doreen Graham-Pichet, is an amazing woman, and she is one of the world's foremost authority on behavior of children with autism. She's extremely knowledgeable, and she oversees every single grant we give. She is part of that process.
Hi,
People may think of autism care and treatment as simply schooling or therapy, but we provide important safety supports, things like fencing, for example. The whole family's living in fear of that child running out into traffic. I recently delivered an iPad to a little boy with some of the apps that are out there for children with autism. Miracles happen.
I got the iPad from ACT.
From ACT,
What
yes.
did it say? Can you repeat that, Dustin?
I got the iPad from ACT.
We have helped so many military families, and when I think of these brave families that are fighting two battles, one to protect our country and one for the right treatment and care for their children, it breaks my heart, and I think we have to do more as a nation to help them.
There's not a day that doesn't go by that we don't think about it. Some people say, oh, he's normal. You don't see the battles that I see every single day. My husband does have to deploy, and when they get on that bus, that might be the last time that my kids ever see them.
So I called, and then they informed me that he had received the grant, which was like a blessing from above. I was just like speechless. I just started to cry because, without it, we would have been lost.
The ACT grant was a total miracle, and without that, we wouldn't be able to receive the service dog. So we're so appreciative what they've done for us as a family.
Recently, ACT Today funded a program for military children with autism in San Diego, the Inclusion Films program, which is run by Joey Travolta, and teaches kids on the autism spectrum literal filmmaking skills. They learn how to make a movie.
Are we ready? There you go, got it. Okay. Everything that goes into the process of making a film goes into everyday life. So they're learning life skills, they're learning to collaborate.
It was really nice to know how much they were enjoying this camp, and they're with people who are supporting them and are making them feel great about themselves and their differences and their similarities. And I get two kids that are working together and apart and together and apart, so it's an interrelationship as well as a camp and a learning experience.
It's so fulfilling when I get letters. One stands out for me, a boy who was 14 with Asperger's, and we gave him a grant to go to a drama camp. He wrote to us and said, "Dear ACT Today, thank you for letting me belong for the first time in my life." These kids are remarkable. We underestimate them. They're so knowledgeable, they're so capable, and we can change the life of a family, which means changing the life of a community.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're so thrilled that we have Dr. Adel Najdowski here with us for Real Progress with Dr. Adel. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
It's always wonderful to have you here. We should mention that you are one of the co-creators of Skills. You have extensive experience working within the field of autism and with children on the autism spectrum. And I wanted our jargon today, earlier this week it was chaining and today it was shaping. So I wanted to talk a little bit with you about shaping and how and when do we use it?
Okay. So when we're teaching children different skills, sometimes they have a difficulty of going straight to the target or desired behavior that we want.
Right.
And they do some sort of like form of it or something that's like an approximation to it, but it's not exactly where we want to be. And sometimes it's really hard to prompt those things. So for example, like when we're teaching children articulation, so they're starting to learn to speak, we can't make their mouth physically do things like we can if we're teaching them objects and we say, show me the apple, and we can just guide their hand to the apple, right? And then we can fade out that prompt. So instead we'll use something called shaping, which is where we're going to reinforce each of the successive approximations toward the actual response that is correct.
So in a sense, you're rewarding something that isn't the behavior that you want, but it's getting closer to it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So like, for example, if we wanted a child to say car and they make any sound after we say car, and they go bah or something like that, we might reinforce that. It depends on the child, like what you're going to reinforce, but it's the best thing they can do right now kind of thing.
And we don't want to not reward it because we got a sound.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And so then what happens is once the child is able to say that sound consistently when you're giving an instruction, then now you no longer provide reinforcement for that, and you push them a little bit harder to try to do something a little bit better. And you now provide reinforcement for the new response. So the old approximation that you were reinforcing is no longer getting reinforcement. They have to do something else. It's closer of approximation to get the reinforcement.
So it's that thing of moving the goalpost as they're learning.
Yeah, and sometimes if you have to, you can backstep because you don't want to have failure.
Right.
And so a lot of times you'll come up with what are the steps or something like that, and then if a child's having problems, you can go backwards and then come back forward again, or maybe you need to come up with a less stringent new definition of what you're going to reinforce. Other examples, just to give you, would be like, let's say coloring inside the lines. Sometimes kids, when they're first learning that, they're going to color like way outside the lines, where if they start to get closer and closer to the line, we'll provide reinforcement for that. Things like motor skills, like teaching a child to jump. At first, you might have to reinforce just bending the knees while standing, and then later after that, reinforce bending plus kind of propelling their body upward, but they're not actually leaving the ground yet.
Right.
And so each one of those things slowly is reinforced over time.
Fascinating. All right. I think we should take a short break.
Yeah, lots of examples.
Lots of examples. And I want to come back and talk about it too with older kids, and about how we can shape a behavior in a loved one or an older child, like those teenagers or our husbands. If my husband is watching, he's like, what behavior are we shaping? But the idea that this is a teaching tool and we can use it with kids, but we can also use it in lots of different ways. So we're going to be talking with Dr. Najdowski about that. And just to clear up, because sometimes I get confused about a skill and if I'm going to teach it to my child, am I chaining or am I shaping? Which one is going to be more effective? And hopefully she can clear that up for us. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
Hi guys, welcome back to Smarty. It's January and a whole new year has gone by. To commemorate that, Autism Live and Smarty have decided to give you a template to make your very own time capsule. The materials you'll be needing are glue, a jar, photos, keepsakes, pen, and a template you can print from facebook.com/autismlive. Here's the template that I printed out from our Facebook page. Depending on the skill of your child, they can do this independently, or you're going to help them fill out all the questions. Once you have finished filling out the time capsule sheet, I've left 2 spaces on the top, one for a school photo, one for a family photo. Feel free to glue an image there. Now that I've glued the photos onto my sheet, now I'm going to grab my jar and start filling it up with all the things I would want to remember from the year that just passed. I would say include photos, mementos, toys, things that are going to be really important to you at this time and moment that you'll be excited to see later in the future. Once you're done filling up your jar with all the things that were important to you for the year 2013, you're going to want to seal it up. And it's up to you for how long you want to keep it locked up. Time capsules are a great way to remember where you have been and where you're going. So I hope you really enjoy this activity, and until next time, craft on, guys.
Can you see me flying by your side?
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're here with Dr. Adel Najdowski. We're talking about shaping, and I was saying before the break that sometimes I get a little confused about the difference of when do I use chaining, when do I use shaping. So my question for you is, and we were also going to talk about with older kids, the kinds of things that we might want to do with older kids. So if I've got a slightly older kid and I want to work on that morning ritual of putting all the things together so that they can get themselves together enough that we can get out the door and not be late to school, am I chaining? Do I want to approach this from a chaining or from shaping?
So that would be more on the chaining side, because you're actually taking a whole bunch of behaviors that the child can already do.
Okay. So the fact that he can brush his teeth.
And he can get dressed and he can take a shower.
But I want to chain getting...
And you're chaining those together so that it's one long sequence of behaviors, and then basically, like one basically signals the start of the next, and you don't have to constantly say, like, did you brush your teeth? Did you make your bed? Did you this? Or like tell him, okay, now go brush your teeth, and then he comes back, okay, now go take, you know what I mean? So that you don't have to do that, you kind of come up with the steps, and then you teach them in an order, and you have them occur in that order. One signals kind of, when one ends, it signals the start of the other, and then when they're done with the whole chain, they get a reinforcer.
Okay.
But if they're having problems with one step and they're still learning it, then you might need to use shaping on that one step. Okay. So you can use shaping and chaining together.
Ooh. That's high tech. So for older kids, what kinds of things might I work on with shaping?
The thing that comes to mind, like first off, would be like attention, probably like the length of time that they can attend.
Okay, because we're always all talking about we want to see more focus and more ability to attend, but I can shape that up.
Yeah.
All right, how do I shape up attention?
So basically just look to see, you know, where is the child responding now for their attention, and if they can only attend for 10 seconds, then that's somewhere you can start with.
Okay.
And then just increase, but then don't provide reinforcement for the previous response. So it's, again, like a closer and closer approximation.
Okay.
But this could also be used like with eye contact. Like some kids are really bad at doing eye contact. We can shape that up a little bit.
Okay.
By, you know, requiring longer and longer, but appropriate lengths of eye contact. We don't want them staring at us.
Right.
So those are the kind of things right there. With an older kid, you could also maybe be working on their handwriting. They have very, very sloppy handwriting, let's say.
Now you're in my neighborhood.
And so, you know, we can't just expect them sometimes to go from like extremely sloppy handwriting to perfectly what we want.
You're right.
So we reinforce successive approximation toward the goal.
Yes, we just recently, I shared on the show on Tuesday that because my son changed schools and we had Peter Farrig, the first therapist that ever came to our door, went to school for 2 days to observe and kind of give us a thing of where we are right now at school and so on and so forth. And he kind of very nicely, as a wonderful person in my life, kicked me in the keister and said,
his handwriting is bad.
Well, about like 8 things. He was like, you know, you need to be working on... and you know, it is not time to take a vacation, Miss Penrod. And in a way that, you know, there are very few people in my life that could have said the things that he said to me in the way that he said to them that I would have said, you know what, I'm so grateful to you and I owe you so much. And, you know, and it costs people to be honest, right? And he was like, hello, you know better. So what's the deal here? But one of the things was handwriting. So we have started working on handwriting, but I'll take any help that we can get on shaping this handwriting. So being very careful, because what I've gone back to are the old books that we had where first you're tracing them and then you have to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, and I'm rewarding him for doing that every day.
That's good. And if you notice that his handwriting looks neater today than it did yesterday, but it's not perfectly what you want, you still should provide the reinforcer, and that's where you have the shaping. And then when he can do that, then you say, okay, that's not good enough anymore. Now we have to have this closer approximation to this very beautiful handwriting that we're, you know, like figure out what your goal is, and then as he's get a little bit better, then we reinforce and up the ante on him, and then we don't reinforce the later versions.
Okay. And fluency is it, because he can, if he sits very slowly and he does the thing, he can do it. But when he's writing his things in class, he's not going to go slowly. And I guess it's going to take us a while, that we're just going to have to keep, you know, doing it and doing it and doing it so that we can get to the fluency part, right? I heard that sigh. I'm feeling that sigh.
I'm sighing because I hate the handwriting thing, because nobody uses handwriting anymore. Everyone types.
Well, and can I tell you, every year at the IEP, we had arguments about this. And I finally got to a point in 3rd grade where I went, forget it. Forget it. We're not working on it in school anymore. We'll work on it at home. We did, but I haven't followed through, as was reminded to me last Friday, very nicely and gently. And that I was expecting, and here I know there are many of you out there listening that feel the same way, that, you know, over an entire summer, we did what we started back to now, where he was doing this, and it didn't translate into the goal, so I went, forget it. instead of keeping, if I had shaping it, instead of shaping it, because I want that result. And sometimes the result takes really long. And Peter Farrig stood on the sidewalk out in front of the school and said, it may take you 5 years. You have something better to do with your time? He needs to be, and I made the argument, I said, but everything is with, and he said, I don't care. You know, what else better do you have to do with your time? Make sure that he can write.
Yeah. Just make sure to also choose your battles and look at the list and figure out what's really going to like be the most important things.
Yes. Yeah, and there are other things that were on the list that we, you know, have taken. We're taking a very, it's like 10 minutes a day that we're devoting towards the handwriting and hoping that over 5 years we're going to, but it's the patience factor with the shaping. Really, that's really what we're talking about here, is the frustration, because when a child can't do a skill, they get frustrated. When they won't do the skill for us, we get frustrated. And what shaping is doing is saying we're going to
lowering the frustration.
We're going to lower the frustration, but we're not going to see the goal as quickly because we lowered the frustration level.
Yeah.
Am I in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I was just sitting here thinking about my son actually just started seeing an orofacial myologist, which is someone who's supposed to help him because he has a tongue thrust.
Okay.
And it's really causing major problems with him with a lot of things, like it pushes against his teeth, and so now his teeth are sticking out, and he's always licking his lips, and his lips are kind of weak and stuff. And he has to do these exercises now 3 times a day, and he's miserable and stuff. And so I'm actually just sitting here thinking how I need to make sure I'm doing shaping with him, because some of them are really hard.
Yeah, I can well imagine.
So when a skill is really hard is a time when shaping would be good to use.
And again, key is rewarding. Rewarding, 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 because otherwise he's not going to want to do it, and you're not going to want to do it.
Oh, yeah.
I live in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Okay, we are going to take a break, and we're going to come back more with Dr. Najdowski, so stick with us.
Potty training is different for every child. A child could come in with absolutely, no control over their bladder, and as long as that's not a medical issue, then we can certainly approach it behaviorally and give them the tools they need to be successful, just like any other skill that we would teach.
Well, we think he's learning to pee on the potty. No big successes yet, and lots of accidents. Here is the laundry from today.
For some of our kids takes, just a couple days. And then for other kids, it can take months and months and months. And then when you're looking at complete independence, it can take years.
Hey, you have to go pee-pee?
There's a lot of different ways to tell if a child is ready. We look for a couple different things. Probably the most important is parents saying, I need this to happen, I'm ready. Second is, a child showing interest in the bathroom, and some of it is simply age. It's time to go ahead and work on this.
What are you doing? Pooping. You're pooping?
You first start with teaching the child what they need to do on the toilet. The basic thing we want is for them to drink as much liquid as possible. It's inevitable that if you drink a bunch of liquid, you're gonna pee.
Help. No, I can't help you pee. Help. I can hold your hand, but I can't help you pee.
Ultimately, what we want is that, the child, as soon as they're put on the toilet, they urinate. So that's step one. Step two is usually working through the amount of time that they're off of the toilet and making sure that they're not having accidents during the time that they're off. So this is kind of the bladder control stage of things.
So the purpose of the potty log is just to see how long it takes them as soon as they sit on the potty for them to actually urinate, and the amount of time that he's able to hold his urine. And with the log, we're able to visually see how long it takes them each time, and if they have accidents or not. He's on a half-hour potty schedule, so if he doesn't go when we take him, then we have to take him in 10 more minutes. So every 10-minute intervals until he does go, and then we reset the clock, and it's 30 minutes again.
Okay, buddy. Okay, last chance to go pee-pees. Do we reset it for 10?
Oh, what does that mean? What does that mean, Jack? It's potty time! We can come play after. Hurry!
What we hope happens in this time is that the kids will learn how to initiate going to the bathroom on their own. This is oftentimes the hardest part of potty training is because they get so used to somebody telling them when they need to go that they're not really recognizing the signs just in their own body of when they need to go.
Oh, he wet himself.
Uh-oh. Big wet?
Was it a lot? We can reset to half an hour now.
The biggest thing for parents is not to give up. The other big tip, and I think pitfall that a lot of parents fall into, is putting their children back into pull-ups or diapers, especially if they're starting to have accidents. And this is probably the worst thing that you can do. They need to recognize that feeling of fullness in their bladder and take themselves to the bathroom or tell an adult that they need to go to the bathroom.
What do you have to do? You have to put your pee-pee in the potty. Okay, give it a shot. See if you can put it in there. There you go. There you go. You're doing it. Yay! Good job. Big prayer for your pee-pee. Big prayer for your pee-pee. Yay! Woo! Yay! Good job. What a big boy. High five! High five! High five! High five! High five! High five! High five!
Welcome back to Autism Live. Just a little programming note for you. If you live in the Los Angeles area this weekend, there are a lot of exciting things that are happening, great opportunities for our kids who are on the autism spectrum. Every year, Los Angeles as a city has one day that they offer free admission to over, I think it's 27 museums. And that is happening on Saturday. So on Saturday, if you are in the Los Angeles area, you have the ability to go to the Gene Autry Museum of Western Heritage. There is Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art. The list goes on and on and on. Really remarkable. It's entirely for free. And, you know, I know that people will make the argument that on those days it's very crowded, so you want to be aware of the fact that there are going to be sensory issues, but it also means that if you're not going to stay a very long period of time, you won't have paid the exorbitant. If you're a family dealing with autism, you know, sometimes you don't have the money to go to a museum, right? So it gives that ability to go and maybe you just go and spend 15 minutes, but it's a benefit to your kids and to our kids. So we hope you participate in that. And also this weekend in Orange County, Stars and Strikes, a fabulous event that is bowling. Eddie Guidardo and his family are hosting this wonderful event. It's all to raise money for autism, and an array of incredible sports stars at this event on Sunday. That's called Stars and Strikes. You can Google that for more information, but if you're in the Los Angeles area on Saturday, go to a museum. You'll enjoy it. That's what we're going to do. We're going to take a break. We're going to be right back with Shannon Des Roches Rosa, so stick with us.
Skills is an online program that provides assessment, curriculum, positive behavior support planning for challenging behavior, and progress tracking, and it does this all in one place. The skills assessment and curriculum addresses 8 areas of development, which even includes advanced higher level areas such as executive functions and cognition, which pretty much makes skills the only ABA-based set of curricula for teaching more complex skills, things like problem solving, planning, self-management, perspective taking, and even inferring and predicting others' private events. Skills is a 4-step system. Step 1 is to add the child to your account. Step 2 is to start assessment. The skills assessment is the only ABA-based assessment with psychometric research demonstrating the language subscale to have excellent reliability. Every area of human functioning and typical child development from infancy to adolescence was researched, making the skills assessment the most comprehensive of its kind in the world, and we're quite proud of that.
Skills is easy to use. Simply click Start Assessment and begin answering questions. Or simply type in a keyword, find specific activities to assess, and add activities to treatment. Step 3. Choose activities. Once you've completed the assessment, Skills selects from a pool of 4,000 activities categorized by age, level, and skill type to provide you with exactly those activities each child needs. Start by choosing a curriculum, then a lesson, and finally an activity. Click the information icon to view prerequisites, ages in which targets develop, examples, and IEP goals. Click the video icon to watch a short video. Once you've identified an activity you want to teach, adding activities to treatment is a snap. Step 4. Start treatment. Here you can access customizable activity lesson details, add your own customized targets and exemplars, and edit an activity status such as introducing or mastering it. You can even print handouts such as worksheets, tracking forms, visual aids, and other materials. Skills also offers multiple progress charts mapping curriculum progress, lesson progress, and cumulative number of activities and targets mastered over time. The Skills language curriculum is categorized by verbal behavior type so that users can identify progress for verbal operants, such as echoics, mans, tax, and interverbals.
Skills is one of the only programs that provides the ability to write behavior intervention plans, or BIPs, for challenging behavior.
With just a few clicks, the outline of the behavior intervention plan is written for you and ready to be printed and implemented.
You can learn more about Skills today and get started by visiting us at www.skillsforautism.com, or you can call us at 877-975-4559. Skills. Progress starts here.
Welcome back to Autism Live. During this month of January, we are featuring blogs about the autism spectrum in our Blog-A-Rama. We couldn't do that without including Shannon Des Roches Rosa. She's joining us via Skype right now. An amazing mom, an amazing writer, and very, very prolific. So Shannon, tell us about some of the different sites that you write for.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Well, I've been writing at my personal site, which is www.squidalicious.com. That's a blog since 2003, when my son Leo was first diagnosed with autism. It's kind of expanded now to include more of a iPad and autism role, and I actually do a lot of iPad advocacy, actually talk all over the world. I'm going to the National Autistic Society in the UK next month to talk about them. So that's that site. So I talk about parenting there and iPads mostly. And then I'm also one of the editors. I'm the senior editor and a co-founder at Thinking Person's Guide to Autism, which is kind of a hub and community for sharing information between autistic people, parents, and professionals. And then I also am the contributing editor for parenting kids with special needs at blogher.com.
Really, really remarkable. And we want to encourage people to go to these different sites and read, because you're a great resource, you're a beautiful writer, and you're a very involved member of the community. So definitely check out at least Squidalicious and Thinking Person's Guide to Autism, because Shannon does some beautiful work in those places. Now, Shannon and I, we were going to take a break, but I want to power through and talk a little bit about one of your things that you really espouse talking about is the idea of autism acceptance versus autism awareness. Talk to us a little bit about why you feel that's so important, that distinction.
Oh, sure, no problem. You know, it's one of those things, and again, I have to thank you for giving me the time to talk here, because autism acceptance, I don't think that's something that a lot of parents especially come to on their own, because accepting that disability is part of natural human variation, and that it can come into anybody's life, especially if you are paying attention to whether or not you have relatively quirky family members in your genetic family tree. That's not something that most of us are taught to pay attention to. So a lot of times when parents learn that their child is autistic, it's very distressing. You know, a lot of people aren't prepared for it because, you know, it less so now, but it used to be that we didn't really talk so much about disability in our lives or autism in our lives. And so I think most parents come from a place, they enter the autism parenting world from a place of, you know, distress and complete unpreparedness. And so just awareness of autism for a lot of people is really all they're ready to handle at that point. And I think it's really important to get the word out that autistic people like my son and my friends are just part of the community, and like anybody else, we should be working harder to understand them and their needs, especially when you talk about kids like my son, he's 13. He's an absolute delight. Anybody who's met him can tell you he's just the greatest kid. He has a lot of challenges, and most of that is difficult for him, like in terms of being making it difficult for him to speak and communicate, and sensory issues and physical issues. And a lot of that is, again, like if we knew more about autism, and I don't just mean in terms of research, but we need that too in terms of understanding, genetic pathways and the reasons for autism. But if we had more understanding of what autistic people mean and what autistic people need and how best to support them and help them live the lives that would be the best for them, that's autism acceptance. And if we work towards that, then I think everybody, parents, autistic people, professionals, everybody's life is going to be easier if we kind of hit the ground running, instead of having to spend so much time just trying to figure out what autism means in our lives. It's we need more understanding. And I think the best way to do that, in my opinion, besides going to Thinking Person's Guide to Autism, because I'm obliged to say that, is to read the blogs of autistic people themselves, or books, things like the Loud Hands Project, if people are familiar with the Loud Hands Project, or going to the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. Or there's just some really amazing blogs by adults called like Unstrange Mind and Yes, That Too are a couple of really fantastic ones, or anything by Ibby Grace Anderson. These are really wonderful resources or We Are Like Your Child is another one where they tell adult autistics talk about their experiences being autistic children. And I think it's another important thing is to know that when we think of autistic adults, a lot of us think of people like John Eller Robeson, who is a tremendously empathetic, compassionate, intelligent, brilliant, wonderful man. I just love him. But, he's one kind of autistic. But right. The thing is, a lot of autistic adults who are, winning chess tournaments and things like that had been non-speaking children in their early childhood, had been children very much like my son. And we're finding out now through a lot of AAC, augmentative and alternative communication options, like iPads with symbol-based communication systems, that a lot of our kids are actually able to, they're in there. It's almost like a locked-in syndrome. Of course, not everybody. We have to accept all of our children for exactly who they are. I'm not saying that, all of our children there are geniuses locked inside, but a lot of our children truly don't have the ability to communicate the way that they are capable of communicating. And again, going back to acceptance and working our very hardest to find out what it is that autistic kids and people of all ages need to succeed and live the best life possible. So that's a long version.
No, but I love your vision for that, and I think that it's really important, and I really wanted to give you an opportunity to share that. You are not a stranger to controversy, and I don't want to delve into it in great detail, but one of the things on the Thinking Person's Guide to Autism, there is an opportunity for a discussion for people to have, and we will say this, that sometimes parents of young kids on the autism spectrum and adults who have a diagnosis of autism don't always agree on things, and you allow the discourse to happen on the site. I mean, it happens and you don't shut it down, and there are people who get fatutzed about that, who don't want the discussion to happen and suggest that you should shut it down. But maybe you could speak to why you think that discussion is important.
Sure. Well, what we found, and we've kind of learned this over the years. I mean, I think any kind of process takes a while, especially when you're talking about, people coming from really disparate perspectives with, again, a lack of understanding. In a lot of these cases, we really want people to learn from each other. We really do. And in the early part of the site, especially on the Facebook page, we didn't do a lot of moderation because we thought people needed to really be able to communicate. Well, that didn't work. So we stepped in and we started moderating more. But even so, you know, people still were really, and people get very, very emotional and very involved in their perspectives, you know, and in a lot of cases, there's, I'm sure you're aware of confirmation bias and the fact that when you are very emotionally attached to an idea, it's very difficult to, you know, your emotions are your first impulse, and, you know, your rational self comes second. So especially when we're involved in these forums, a lot of time we aren't at our best. Right. We're not at our most rational. So
that's very kind of you, because sometimes people, you know, on both sides, sometimes, you know, I think we look at it and go, that's unfortunate. Sure. But I do appreciate that you, you know, as a parent of a child who's on the spectrum, that someday he's going to be one of those adults having an opinion. I know I don't want to be in a place where we say that's not allowed.
Sure. Well, just to finish up really quick.
Sure, absolutely.
So what we've done actually just this last month, just within the last few weeks, we've actually changed our comment policy, and we've made it very, very clear-cut that people need to stick to the facts. We do not allow any kind of personal attack. Mm-hmm. People need, you know, of course, we are not disallowing any emotional involvement, of course, but if people can't stick to the facts, and especially if people start slinging ableist insults at other people, or telling people that they just couldn't possibly understand, and making presumptions about other people, and you can go to our site. If you go to thinkingautismguide.com and you go to the top bar, there's a button that says comment policy. And so what we've been doing, even though we are a very tiny team of 4 volunteers, it's me and then Jennifer Bide-Myers and Emily Willingham, who's our science editor, and then Carol Greenberg, who is both autistic and an autism parent. And so, you know, we monitor it as best we can given our busy lives. But we have definitely cracked down because we want it to be a safe space for everybody. We don't want anybody to feel like they can't say what they want to say, but you can't say it if you're going to disrespect somebody. You know, if somebody tells you that something is harmful to them, you might not think it's harmful, but if somebody has told you that it's harmful, then you need to respect that. And I don't think there's any perfect way to moderate anything, but we've been doing our best. And I will tell you that in the last month, since we've enacted our comment policy, we've actually seen a 10% jump in membership.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, so it's been a real success, and we're really happy about it.
Well, Shannon, we think you're remarkable, and we appreciate all of the hard work that you do, and we want to encourage people, go to squidalicious.com and read some of the wonderful things that you write, and they can also check out Thinking Person's Guide to Autism. Thank you so much for being with us and being a part of this Blog-A-Rama.
Thank you so much, Shannon. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk.
All right, take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
We are going to take a break. We're a little bit late going to the A word, but this is the ongoing documentary being made here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders following a little boy, Jack Riley, who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2 and has begun his early intensive behavioral intervention. And I want to take just a second, I don't think I eliminated it, to read something that somebody had written in on Tuesday. It's amazing to see how far Jack Riley has come. It gives me so much hope for my child. Thank you for sharing this on your show. I think everyone should watch these videos. I've even suggested that my son's habilitation therapist watch this show. I personally have learned so much from them. And I thank you because I think this series is really important. I think it's a great way for people to learn about what the arc of intensive behavioral intervention looks like, how patient you need to be with learning a skill, what the emotional component is for the family, and how much progress can be achieved. So we're back at the beginning of the series, and I believe this is still the first time that a therapist comes to this little boy's house, but I encourage you to watch the full series to see how much progress he has made over the last 2 years. But take a look. This is the A word.
Hi, Jeff Riley. Look at me. Good looking, buddy. I brought some toys to play with today. Is that cool? Okay, you want to play? Say,
Therapy, that one-on-one, when kids have been in an environment where no one understands them, and then you finally put them in an environment where they understand all the consequences, of where they see, oh, you know, if they did something that was supposed to be done, they get reinforced for it.
say, yeah, there we go. Good job.
For the first time, kids like him start to understand kind of interaction, because it's made very clear in therapy. We'll start just like all therapy, which is we start with compliance.
Do this. Good job. It's your turn.
Really working on getting him to listen to us, listen to a few directions like stand up or come here.
This is come here. All right, bud? Okay, try by yourself, okay? Come here. All right, you did it. Good job. See, that was so easy.
The idea is that we had to get his attention first. And once you get a good foundation of compliance, then his therapy would be a combination of at the table, where it's very clear and succinct language, combined with just more play.
You say, what is that? Banana, that's right. Banana. What else do you see? Carrots. Good talking.
Then we look at language, making sure that he can make his desired requests and needs met. Getting him to figure out that, hey, I'm learning these words, and these words are actually useful. It teaches them the idea of communication. I'm not using another person as a tool.
Okay, sure. Here you go.
And then also what's important to the family. You know, what behaviors or what areas of focus do they need help with?
One goal, I don't know how we're going to get there, but one of the things I've noticed that's different about him is I'll see a 2-year-old in one of our little restaurants that we can take him, and the kid just feeds himself lunch. Now Jack feeds himself pancakes, he feeds himself applesauce, but most everything else we have to feed him. And I'm really looking forward to the day where he just eats.
Okay, so that's banana by a spoon. He likes the taste of banana, he doesn't mind the texture in his mouth, but when you get the visual into it, he gets very upset. So it just strikes me that it's all behavior.
He's playing defensive ball right now.
And there was banana in that yogurt too, so he eats it every day. And he gets so upset, so offended.
I think a lot of his issues with eating have developed into behavioral issues. I think he may have had texture issues, and I think he probably still has a lot of sensory issues, but I think a lot of it now is habit.
I think for Jack Riley, he was very tactile defensive in his mouth. He just doesn't like the feeling of it. And then it moves into a routine. It moves into the rigidity of autism, where they only want to eat certain things. They like what is familiar, and they like to do the same things over and over. And I think the fact that he's not eating food where he really has to chew, that's going to affect his oral motor development, which will affect his language and how clear he is. Getting some of that muscle development going in his face and his mouth, because you're going to have to use a lot of those muscles to be able to make sounds and make words.
What are you doing, kiddo? So silly.
It is Thursday night, day 2 of our official ABA services have kicked in, and we are getting ready for bed. We run our energies off at night before bedtime. After the intensity of ABA, it's shocking that he has any energy. We think he'll sleep very well tonight. They're definitely pushing him to say sounds and do things he's not used to doing. He had a few meltdowns, and he did okay. He's gonna be so smart.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back. That was the A Word, an amazing series. You can watch it in its entirety. You can skip around and watch specific skills as they teach them to Jack Riley. There is the YouTube page that you can go to find all of that. I love this series, and it always reminds me of things that I've forgotten. I love, you know, when he's running around, it's the end of the night, and he's running off the energy of therapy, because I had completely forgotten until a couple of weeks ago, and my husband and I were just talking about this, that sometimes my son would have 2, and even on the rare day, 3 sessions in a day when he was very little. So we might have a morning session, an afternoon session, and a late afternoon session. And, you know, they would play with him throughout so that it wasn't all work, but there was still, in order to transition into the night and have our great day, we had to have a series of things that we would do so that he could go to sleep and kind of let go of the day and the excitement. And during the last session, I would always start dinner in the kitchen, and as soon as the last therapist left, we would put on music, and my husband and my son and I would dance for like 5 minutes while dinner was cooking. We would just dance like crazy people around the house to get all the yayas out, right? And that we don't do that anymore. My husband and I were talking about this, going, remember we used to do that when we just put on, you know, like one song, but it was a way of letting go of, we just did that, and now we're transitioning into something else. And I forget how important it is sometimes. You know how when you're really engrossed in something, maybe you're sitting at a computer, you're writing something, and somebody interrupts you, and you have to, like, you know, pay attention to what they want. And it's hard for us to make that transition, right? And then you have to come back to the work, and it's like, it's hard to get back into it. And years ago, somebody had taught me that when we need to transition from something and let something go, maybe you've left work and it's time to pick up your child at school and to get back into a different mode, that having some sort of a physical movement or release can help to say, we're done with that activity and we're moving on to the next one. We can do that as parents, we can do that as teachers, and we can teach that to our kids to help the transition from one big thing. That's done now. Now we're going to do this. So just remembering that. And this entire series, the A Word, so important. I love this. I've said from the beginning that making a record, because, you know, people are already looking at Jack Riley and saying, oh, did he really have a diagnosis of autism? Yes, watch the video. Here's the playback. I love that he has the opportunity to be able to do that. I think it's one of the great perks for this family after they've been so generous with their time and their privacy. Really, really remarkable family. Okay, we had a question that came in that somebody wanted to know, have you seen the cards similar in size to a credit card the Asperger or autistic individual can carry and show to people, such as police, explaining that they're dealing with an autistic person? Do you know where they can be obtained? Well, I want to tell you that there are several different kinds of cards that are available. TACA, if you go to their site, tacanow.org, they have cards that are available for parents that you can take with you. I used to have these in my purse. I only ever remember using one once, but it says on it, my child has autism, and here's where you can go get more information, so that if you're someplace and your child is tantruming and some nosy Budinsky is trying to, you know, that you can just hand them a card so that you're not publicly disclosing that your child has autism, that you don't have to get into a big discussion, but they shut their traps, right? Great little cards. I only used one once. And they're available to you free. You can go to TACA Now, and they have those. The card that you're specifically talking about, though, that the person who is on the spectrum carries themselves, the only one that I'm aware of is through Emily Island. We had her on the show the other day. She's got her film Be Safe the Movie out. You can go to Be Safe the Movie on Facebook, and you can talk to her about that. But I know it's included in her the information that comes in conjunction with the movie, all the curriculum and the worksheets and all of that, that it's available in that package, Be Safe the Movie. Now, I will tell you something that we're going to be covering in the coming weeks weeks, there is a new law that is getting ready to be voted on in Virginia that will allow, just like there is a voluntary thing that you can put on your license in that state that says that you're diabetic or you have other medical issues, it will allow the person on their ID to identify themselves as somebody who is on the autism spectrum. So if the police ask for your ID, it's there on your ID. It is completely voluntary. It will not be something that is, required, but the fact that you have the option to do it, and of course, a lot of people are saying this is a great idea, and of course there's always going to be naysayers, but since it's voluntary, if you chose to have it on your license, you could. I think that that's a powerful, powerful tool. We'll be talking to the mom in the coming weeks who has been pushing for this law to be on the books. All right, we are going to take a short break, and we're going to come back with more of Autism Live after these messages.
Monica Holloway is a critically acclaimed author, speaker, and activist. She is also an autism mom. Her son Wills was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3. Now, at the age of 15, Wills is a high school freshman, attending a mainstream school.
I'm in a brand new school. I'm in a great school that I love, and I'm really happy there. I made friends pretty quickly on the first day, and something interesting happened to me on the first day.
Tell me.
We were doing an art project with fabric markers, and there was a little label on it that said, "Squeeze for best results."
Okay.
And so I squeezed it and exploded all over the people at my table.
Oh no!
And we were all covered in little blue dots.
I asked Wills how he describes autism to people.
I say that I have Asperger's syndrome, which is a slight form of autism. It doesn't make you any different. It really doesn't. It's just there, and it just kind of makes you who you are.
I asked Wills what he thought of the Sandy Hook shooter's actions being linked to autism.
Please, just don't be scared of autism. If somebody has autism, don't be scared of them. Chances are they're not violent. They're just like you or me.
Monica is a proud mom with good cause. I asked her to describe Wills in 5 words.
Generous, curious, funny, sensitive, loving.
We had a chance to talk about the Sandy Hook massacre and how Monica heard the news.
On Friday, when the shooting happened in Connecticut, I was in my car, and my husband Michael called to tell me what had happened. And I was in a state of shock, as I think we all were, but that many children. And I felt, I guess a mind can't take in that kind of information without feeling nauseous. I felt it go from here all the way down my body. I started calling everybody I knew to tell them I loved them, and I was thinking about them, and I just wanted to be with the people that I knew. I started hearing more and more information come on the news about this shooter having Asperger's or being autistic. And then I started hearing things about, well, does autism cause violence? And I was in a whole other level of shock. Never in a million years would I think that somebody might associate us and my son's face with the face of violence just because he has Asperger's. And I've seen bad days and good days, and that's what kills me, is like there was not a day bad enough to ever make me think that he or any of his friends could ever be violent. The only thing that made me even feel a little bit better, to do something to help educate. And so we've started a campaign on my Facebook page, Cowboy and Wills. It's called I Am the Face of Autism. And please post a picture of yourself. It can be your child, your friend with autism. Let's put these beautiful faces of these people with autism on to wipe out the face of this murderer. Let's put our faces in front of his.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are so thrilled because it's Thursday in the later portion of the show, so we have Dr. Jonathan Tarbox with us. We call this Science Beat with Dr. Tarbox because you have a great brain. I always say you have a beautiful brain, and you have been very involved in research having to do with autism. You're the head of research and development at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. You're also the director of the Autism Research Group, and you've been a part of a lot of different studies having to do with autism. but you have extensive experience working with individuals on the spectrum. So you know, an ideal person to pick his brain. Now, we had a lot of things happen in our world this week in the autism community. Avonte Oquendo, who went missing from his school on October 4th. I'm sure you guys have heard by now the remains were recovered last week, and then earlier this week they identified them as being Avonte. And, you know, we've talked about that here on the show, but I wanted to take an opportunity to talk with Dr. Tarbox because we all need to mourn, but we all need to get more informed and to kick it into gear a little bit. We have a responsibility to our kids to understand what these eloping, wandering, and bolting behaviors are and what we can be doing about them. So let's start, Dr. Tarbox, by talking about, some people say bolting, some people say wandering, some people say elopement. I'm sure that there are other terms as well. What is it that we're talking about? Define it for us, if you would.
Right. Well, first of all, I'd like to say it's just tragic news, and you know, it's really terrible when the consequences of some of these behaviors really hit home. And thankfully, it's not very often, but even once is one time too many. You know. So yeah, it's just terrible. And so the behavior is, you know, like you said, all people use all those different terms. Elopement is the term that's usually used more scientifically. It sounds kind of funny. It sounds like running away to get married.
Yeah,
right?
Sounds like you're going to Niagara Falls.
Right,
we go, elopement, what's happening here?
Yeah,
but there's nothing pretty about it.
Right, exactly. The term bolting is a little bit weird. It sounds like a horse. Isn't that what they say when a horse runs away? So I don't know what term's the best. Running away, that could work too. Sometimes people say leaving the caregiver without the caregiver's permission or caregiver's awareness, but basically it involves the child on the spectrum or on or off the spectrum, either way, leaving the caregiver's area without the caregiver's knowledge or awareness or permission, and it can involve the child leaving their home without their parents or caregivers knowing. It can involve leaving the school. It can involve leaving the caregiver's presence when they're out in public. So we talk to a lot of parents whose kids will run away when they're at in the mall or at Disneyland or at the park. And it's kind of one of those things where you want your child to have independence and you want your child to, you know, be able to function somewhat on their own, but at the same time, you need to keep them safe. So it's a really tough one.
I tend to, when we go to Disneyland, I watch little kids, and it's fascinating to me now because I've only had the one child. Of course, I was an aunt before that, but I've been through this experience with my son, and not too long ago, we were at Disneyland, and I was watching, a parent was standing in line with a 2-year-old, a little girl, and the 2-year-old was standing right next to her, and the mother was, you know, kind of spacing out in someplace else, and the little girl was standing right there, and I couldn't stop staring. I just stood there and thought, we never had that ever. If my child, if somebody didn't have a hold of him, and, you know, he had a harness that we would put on him with a leash, and people would make fun of us. Sorry, because if his feet touched the ground, that boy ran. He liked the wind in his hair, is what I would say to people. He just ran, and even early on, way before we had the diagnosis, I just thought that was who he was. And the concept of, you know, other parents who would sit on their front steps and the child would play on the sidewalk right there, that was not an option for us.
Absolutely, yeah.
It wasn't something, I remember him being in a backyard at a Thanksgiving dinner, and both my husband and I were like trying to make a fence between the two of us, and, you know, it looked like we were playing hockey and being the goalies. And I think that a lot of times people just don't understand how difficult it is when you've got a kid who's just going to run.
That's right. And a lot of kids on the spectrum are like that.
Yeah.
A lot, and we don't know exactly why. But I like your sort of analogy or metaphor or whatever of he likes the feeling of the wind in his hair. That actually could be part of it. For a lot of kids, it just feels good to run, and it feels good to engage in hyperactive behaviors. So whether it's running or, you know, acting wacky or silly or jumping on a trampoline or climbing on a play structure, all of those behaviors give a lot of just sort of stimulation. You know, just movement feels good and activity feels good for a lot of these kids. So it could be automatically reinforced or self-stimulatory, which means it just feels good. And a lot of these kids, they don't realize what they're getting into. So it feels great for the first minute while they're running away, and then they look around and they might not have the skills to get back, you know. So yeah, it's a major challenge.
So I want to talk a little bit about what we do when we identify that we've got a child that does this. And we should note that my child, you know, early on, it was all the time, 100%. I could count on if I put him down, he was going to run.
Right.
Some kids will run sometimes and not other times, right?
Right.
And I almost think that there is something about that that's harder because when do you let your guard down? I knew that I couldn't let my guard down at all.
That's right.
And that was stressful. But when do you, let your guard down? So we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back and have Dr. Tarbox talk to us about what steps we want to take as a parent to figure out what we're going to do about it. We're not just going to take a laissez-faire, oh, whatever happens, happens attitude. We got to do something about it when we've got a child who's doing these behaviors. So stick with us. Hi, we're here with Temple Grandin, and we're going to be asking her some of your questions that you guys have written into us. First of all, Temple, I want to thank you for being with us here today.
No, it's good to be here.
This is a question that I want to know. When you went to the Emmys and you went to all these different events and you were there in your wonderful shirt, was there anybody who tried to talk you into wearing something else, or did they just understand that you needed to be who you were?
Well, I think being eccentric is just fine. I dressed eccentric at the Emmys. Eccentric's fine. Being a filthy slob is not fine. Let's look at the latest Mars rover. You got the Mohawk guy that's the head of the expedition. You got the Elvis guy that figured out how to land on the moon and he wears Elvis outfits. I think that's just fine. But you can't be a rude, filthy, dirty slob. That's the thing where draw the line. Eccentric's fine. I remember a guy who was on the spectrum and he taught astronomy at a local college. And he had beautiful astronomy t-shirts and he had long hair with a ponytail this long. And I said to him, don't let anybody cut your ponytail off. Wear it with pride, but it must be washed and it must be clean.
There you
and
go.
Neat.
Love it. Did they try to talk you into wearing a dress, or they
Oh no, nobody knew I would wear a dress. I got too much of a farmer tan and would just look just terrible. No, you're not going to get me in an evening gown. I did buy some new black pants. I'm going to wear it tonight.
Well, I thought you looked great.
Well, I want to let you know about the shirt award of the Emmys.
Yeah.
That was a Ralph Lauren shirt.
There
okay,
you go.
fashion snobs. And that was a gift from my sister for Christmas.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are here with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. He's the head of research and development at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and he's talking with us about wandering, eloping, bolting when our kids leave the area without permission and how terrifying that is. So we've identified what it is, and I think the thing that was the single most shocking thing about this week when we talked about this here on the show, what happened with Avonte Oquendo, and I was saying, this is terrible because it didn't need to happen. He left his school, and that there's training that could be done so that this didn't have to happen. And so many parents, Dr. Tarbox, wrote to me and said, you're talking about this as if there's something you can do about it. And that, to me, I got to tell you, my stomach sank and I said, we're not getting it done. If these parents are feeling like this is just something that they have to live with and they're going to live with the fear, then I have not done my job. Right. So that's part of the reason why we're talking about what can we do about it and how do we go about taking these behaviors on to get better.
Okay, all right. So unfortunately, elopement is one of those behaviors that is extremely challenging to treat effectively and to deal with. Kind of like when we talk about stereotypy or self-stimulatory behaviors, it's just one of the major challenges of autism that even if you do a great job, it could still take a year or two to see really major changes.
But that doesn't mean we don't do it.
No, absolutely not. In fact, it means the opposite. It means we need to try even harder and work even harder on it. Especially since we cannot afford to mess up even once. I mean, we just can't afford. It's a behavior that's so serious that actually it's a lot like leaving a loaded gun around, right? Even if our children know what to do when they see a loaded gun, we're not going to leave a loaded gun on the coffee table, right? Because it only takes one time of playing with that gun to end somebody's life. Elopement is exactly the same thing. And unfortunately, this child whose remains were discovered this week is not the first one, and he's not going to be the last, and it's going to happen again. And again, not just kids on the spectrum, typically developing kids too. It's really critical. We can't let the behavior happen even once. And so other behaviors other challenging behaviors, we actually kind of want them to happen so we can place them on extinction, because then that teaches the child, look, the behavior's not going to work. You're not going to get what you want. So, for example, with tantrums, you know, if the child is tantruming to get your attention, great. Let them tantrum. Don't pay attention to it, right? Do pay attention to the child when they're not tantruming or when they're asking for attention, and that will make the tantruming go away. It works. It's proven to work. With elopement, man, we can't let that behavior happen even once. So it's more challenging to treat in a lot of ways. So really, honestly, the very first step is to pretend that your child had the language to tell you, I'm going to run away when you're not looking. So you better get ready for that. And just think about, if your child dared you, I'm going to run away from you when you're not looking. If they said that vocally to you, how would that change your behavior? What would you do under those circumstances? And you should be doing that. Right? Because that behavior, when it happens, even though they can't tell you that necessarily, they might not have the language skills to tell you that, that is what they're telling you. It's the same thing. Mom or teacher, I'm going to run away from you when you're not looking. It's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and where. Okay? And so what steps would we take if the kid literally looked you in the eye and said that? All right?
That's powerful.
Right? Does it put it? Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So the number one thing that we would do is make it physically not possible for the kid to do it. Okay? And that's not a very good behavioral or skill learning or teaching based solution, but it's the first thing we got to do.
And it's a great safety solution. It's by no means the last thing. But it's the first thing.
It's the first thing, exactly. And it's not a permanent solution. But things like, you know, if it's an open area that we can't possibly physically enclose, then there has to be an adult that stays within arm's length of the child all the time, without exception.
And they have to have running shoes on.
That's
sorry.
right.
I mean, that was one of the things
Heels are not gonna do it.
that we insisted when Jem went to kindergarten, that his aide have shoes that she could book if she needed to.
That's right. And let's face it, shoes that you can run in are better for playing in anyways, you know? So shoes that you can run. Now, if it is possible to physically enclose the area, great. So I know this goes without saying, but honestly, sometimes we do have to say it. You're going to need to have a fence that the kid cannot open. So a fence in your front yard and backyard that your child cannot climb over and cannot open the gate. And so, you know, you might have to place the latch out of reach. You might have to place some kind of lock on the latch that requires fine motor skills that your child doesn't have. You might have to make the fence higher than it currently is. You might have to go through every single inch of the fence and make sure there are no holes that your child can slip through. You may have to place the doorknobs in the house out of reach. That might look weird, but oh well, it's worth it, right? So the first thing is go through and see what physical barriers can we place to make running away not possible.
And I do want to interject and say that if you're thinking to yourself, how am I going to afford that? If you're in the place where you fear that your child will elope, Act Today has emergency grants for just exactly those kinds of things when it's life-threatening, and they do fund fences and things of that nature. They will, of course, encourage you to, in conjunction with it, get behavioral support and help. But they do fund fencing. That's how imperative it is. So don't let a lack of funds stop you from making that step. Okay, so moving on, once we have secured the perimeter of where the child is going to be, then what do we do?
Okay, then the very next thing we do, which is always the first thing we think of when we're looking at things behaviorally, is why is the kid doing the behavior? What does he want? The kid wants something, right? It's not random. Running away is not random. It's not caused by an autism diagnosis. It's caused by a desire for something. Your child wants something, okay? So it could be just a physical activity. It just feels good and it's fun to do it. That's possible. It could be that there's something out there that he's seeking, like a toy or somebody else's food or a play structure. It could be even just looking at stuff in the mall. Sometimes kids will run away just to look in the windows of stores.
3 weeks ago, they saw a toy in that store and they don't realize that time has passed, and they don't even necessarily, maybe it was a mall that they went to in another state when you were on vacation, but they're in a mall and they're going to take off in hopes that they find that toy.
Exactly. So what we're going to do is figure out why they're doing it, what the cause of the behavior is, or in behavioralese, the function of the behavior. Okay, so that requires a functional behavioral assessment or a functional assessment.
Okay, and once we get a good idea, because sometimes it's hard to know
it's usually pretty hard, actually.
But once we get an idea, we're going to implement an intervention.
Correct.
And what kinds of things does that entail?
Right. So the nice thing, again, the nice thing about ABA is a lot of it is kind of the same set of procedures. They just need to be adapted, right?
Okay.
But once you understand the basics, then it's a matter of just figuring out how to apply those basics to each individual different situation. And so with running away, it's the same thing. Like any other challenging behavior, you want to figure out why the person's doing it.
Right.
You want to give them a lot of that, whatever that thing is that they want, give it to them a lot, and give it to them when they do a different behavior that's safer and more adaptive.
Okay.
So if they want toys, if they're trying to go get some toys in the mall, then get a bunch of toys that they like.
Right.
Okay, teach them how to ask for it.
Right.
And
That's
give it
key.
to them when they ask for
That's
it.
key. You got to teach them some sort of communication to appropriately ask for that thing and then
Right.
give it to them.
And that goes for any challenging behavior. Communication is always the best replacement behavior, and it doesn't have to be vocal speech. It could be sign language. It could be a picture exchange communication system. It can be an iPad using a communication program. It doesn't matter, but it has to be some basic basic communication that's easy for the child to do and that you can prompt frequently. As soon as they do the communication, you give them what they want every time at first.
Now, this is when the reality of this we have to talk about for a second because it gets inconvenient.
Right, absolutely.
Right? Because if what your child wants is to go to the Dairy Queen, and that's why they've run out the door because they know that there's a Dairy Queen 3 miles down the road and there's traffic in between, and you figured out that that's what they want, and you gave them the communication skills, and then they say, I want Dairy Queen. In the beginning, you're going to have to pack up and go to the Dairy Queen.
Right.
To give them the reward.
And you can make it more convenient by, for example, you can go to Dairy Queen at the beginning of the week and maybe get a larger thing to go, and then when they request for it, you give them a few bites or a small serving, right?
Now, see, that's arrested mind thinking. There is what that is. Because a lot of times when you're in it as a parent, you haven't had enough sleep to think that through. But there you go. There's a great solution. So thinking that through ahead of time, but knowing how to be able to give that reward when they ask for it.
Right.
Because remember, it's life and death. And so if you set this up that if they ask for it, they're going to get it, everything else is not as important. I'm sorry.
Literally.
Yeah, everything else pales. Okay, so what else? I interrupted you.
Okay, so teaching to communicate for what they want instead of running away to get it. Also, just giving them what they want a lot beforehand. So, for example, you can set your child up for success by giving your child what you know that they want, what you know they're going to run away for. Just give it to them beforehand before you get there. So again, if you're going to the mall and you think there's a good chance your child's going to run away to the toy store to look at toys, bring some toys that your child really wants to play with, bring those to the mall, and let your child play with the toys while you're walking around in the mall. So what that will do is decrease the motivation to run away to get toys. Why? Because he already has a toy.
Right, and
so
you can always work backwards and make it a little bit longer before they get the toys, or a little bit longer before. You can always work backwards, but we got to start where we are. That's hard for a parent's mind.
It's very hard, yeah.
We want it to be a certain way. We want it to look at a certain way, and to take those steps back. It feels like your whole life is going to be that.
That's
My whole life is going to be that I got to make sure that he has toys before. It isn't.
No.
It isn't going to be that way forever, but we got to start someplace.
Right, and wouldn't you, ask yourself, are you willing to accept that your whole life is going to be that for a day?
Right.
Would that be worth it? Would that be a worthwhile trade-off? Or I'm going to make my whole life about fixing this elopement behavior today. Is that worth it today? And the answer to that is usually going to be yes.
Yes, absolutely. And over time, we're going to, we'll be able to work on this
and make it more convenient, more realistic, and everything else.
Okay, so we got to make sure that we secure the perimeter. We've got to really be working with somebody who's a professional to figure out what the function of the behavior is. And then we're going to make sure that we're giving this child a lot of whatever it was that the paycheck was, and teach them the skill to appropriately ask for it. And then we got to make sure we give it to them.
And I hope this goes without saying, but make sure you do not give them the thing that they want if they do try to run away.
Okay.
That is over, right?
We never reward the behavior.
That's really, really important.
Yeah.
No matter how upset your kid gets, and no matter how frustrating it is for you, and no matter how embarrassing it is in public for them to have a tantrum, man, if they run away from you to get something, they do not get that thing that day.
And we're all sitting here calm.
The next day.
And we're all sitting here calm and going, well, I would never do that. But I remember so to distinctly the woman across the way from me who's 2-year-old, neurotypical, ran away, and we were looking everywhere for her for a half an hour. I mean, you have a 2-year-old, you can imagine how your mind goes crazy. Finally found her, had gone into a neighbor's house and was sitting there having some ice cream, and of course, Mama picked her up and hugged her and said, "I'm so glad you're okay," and the thing of ice cream went home with her. Right? But you know, if we were in that circumstance, in that moment, we would want to do that too. That's why it's important that we talk about it and say that, make sure that there is no reward for that behavior. If they've run across the street to see the new puppies, they don't get to see the new puppies that day.
No. In fact, but tomorrow, make sure they get to see the puppies before they try to run away, right?
Right.
And or prompt the child to ask for the puppies and then immediately go see the puppies.
Yeah, it's tough. This is a tough tightrope, but remember, this is life and death stakes. This is not a game that we're playing here. Okay, anything else that we, you know, just in a general sense that we need to be mindful of, or that's enough right there.
I think that's enough, yeah.
But key, you know, if your child is engaging in this kind of behavior, reach out, ask for help, whether you need that help from ACT today. If you're already working with an ABA provider, tell them this needs to be priority one. We got to be working on this. That doesn't mean you can't work on other things at the same time, but reach out for the help. And if you're not working with an ABA provider, reach out and do that. And if you don't have the funds for that, ACT Today can help you with that as well.
One more final parting note on this topic is elopement is another one of those behaviors that can make you feel embarrassed in public. And so if your child is eloping in public at the mall and you stop him and he has a tantrum, that's going to make you feel embarrassed. So people are going to look at you like you're a bad parent. If your child is eloping at home and you end up doing a bunch of weird specialized modifications to your home to make it difficult to elope, that's going to make your home look less pretty. It's going to make, it's going to make strangers think, oh, why are you treating your 5-year-old as though he's a baby? Why do you have baby locks on everything? Or why do you, right? It is going to make you feel embarrassed, and there's no way to avoid that. And my advice would be, own it. And if anything, the more embarrassing it is, the more it means that you're doing what it takes to protect your child. And who cares?
And remember, other people's opinion of your parenting is none of your business. It's just none of your business. You don't have time for that. You have other things to do. Let them own that. You don't have to do that. Thank you, because it's very true. We would have people say all kinds of things to us when we went someplace with a harness, and I said, we're working on it. Whatever. Don't worry about other people. All right, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back. We've got 2 questions for Dr. Tarbox that you guys have written in, so we're going to address those after these messages.
Torin. There's the two buddies.
I have a 7-year-old son who was diagnosed when he was 22 months old with PDD-NOS. That diagnosis was changed when he was 3 to a full autism diagnosis. There was a long period of time where he didn't sleep at all, and all night long would bang his head and whoop. It was because he was in pain but couldn't tell us.
We're going to back up, showing the speed and grace of this guy.
CARD was one of the only programs that said it doesn't really have to be this way forever. Your child will make progress. We can show you. Just give us time. We started services with CARD when my son was 3.5. Shortly thereafter, my daughter was also diagnosed and started her immediately with services. And I'm pleased to say that I think she's doing exceptionally well and will probably lose her diagnosis in the next 2 years. We started with 3 therapists with my son, and he had actually a 46-hour program. And thankfully, through some of the behavioral training that CARD helped us with, he is back in school.
1 + 9 = woohoo!
He's sleeping at night. CARD has a very robust program. Things that we're working on right now that we could never work on before is learning to play the piano, learning to ride his bike. It just has given us back our quality of life. They focus on our family. What do we need to do to make it more functional? So we're very, very happy with the services, and we feel like we owe everything to CARD because they kind of gave us back our life. I have nothing but love for CARD, for sure.
Welcome back. I'm just here talking with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. He is an amazing resource for all of us, and at least 2 of you have written in with questions specifically for Dr. Tarbox. So let's, and of course I went to the second one. All right, so hi Shannon and Dr. Tarbox. My son is 3 years and 2 months. He has started with CARD in October. Okay. 40 hours, congratulations. According to the supervisor, he is meeting all the goals that are set for him through skills. I feel he knows a lot, but it's like he's a robot. I can't carry a conversation with him. Is that normal? Based on your experience, does it get better? Also, you mentioned that these kids need 30 to 40 hours, scientifically proven, for 2+ years. How long is the plus? Right? I so get, I understand completely where you are. And they wrote, thank you. So help us, Dr. Tarbox, because that first year, I gotta say, it's so hard.
It's a tough year, for sure.
It's a hard year, but you're doing all the right things and you're asking good questions. So help us out, Dr. Tarbox.
Okay, well, first of all, what I'd like to say to your listener is thank you for the good news. It's great in this line of work when you get good news, yes. Right? That your kid is in a top quality program getting the right dose of treatment. Yes. And that is just fantastic, because we spend so much time, so much effort advocating for folks, and it's like we're, just screaming until we don't have a voice anymore just to get people access to that level of treatment. So you're getting the right treatment, so thank goodness.
In the right amount.
In the right amount.
Congratulations.
Right. It's fantastic. Okay, so back to your question, though, about learning lots of content maybe, but still kind of seeming robotic, not being able to hold a conversation. The way that I interpret that, and of course we never know, we can never give child-specific advice, but the way that I'm interpreting that is that he's sort of learning a lot, but not necessarily able to apply it in a practical and meaningful way on a daily basis, or sort of memorizing a lot of content, but maybe not doing so great with generalization, which means sort of the ability to put it all together and actually use the knowledge or use the information in normal, sort of natural, everyday interactions. Mm-hmm. So the first part of her question is that normal? And I would say actually yes. For a lot of kids on the spectrum, it is actually quite normal to be good at learning stuff, but not so great at generalizing it or applying that knowledge. That is, we see that all the time. The second part of your question is, does that get better? And the answer to that is, yes, it does. And so a lot of what we do in top quality ABA programs is not just teach content, memorizing information, but teach the child the general ability to use it in their everyday life. Yeah. And it does take a while to put all of those things together, but you will see a gradual transition from more repetitive or rote behaviors to more natural and flexible and creative behaviors. Yeah. A transition from more sort of just memorizing to understanding and applying concepts. And that is sort of the normal course of treatment within ABA for kids on the spectrum. That being said, it's critical to focus on. It doesn't happen magically. It doesn't happen automatically. It's critical to focus on generalization. And so your kid's supervisor should be focusing on that, and you should be focusing on that. And so a great thing for you to raise every single time you meet with your child's supervisor, which is probably about every 2 weeks, you should ask this question. What can I do to work on generalization this week? Another way to phrase that question is, what has my child learned this week that I can practice with him across multiple other settings and environments? Okay, it's absolutely critical. It doesn't have to be a lot of work. It doesn't have to be a lot of effort on your part, but it's a reminder for the supervisor to make sure they're focusing on generalization, and and your efforts, even if it's 1 or 2 things to remember per night, can really make a huge difference in the long run.
Absolutely. The thing that somebody explained to me early on, because I know I had concerns too about, well, are we just learning this stuff, and how are the pieces all going to go together? Right. And somebody reminded me that when I learned how to drive, that, first I learned from the little book thing, and then my mother set up 2 cans of vegetables, and we practiced with the steering wheel. But then we got in the car, and I had to think it all through. My hands are at 2 and 10. Am I looking at the mirror? I'm doing this. Right. And I wanted to know, how do I get to the part where I'm like my mom, and my mom, this was the 70s, and my mom had a cigarette going, and she had the radio on, and she had one hand on the wheel, and she was talking and doing this and doing that, and it all just looked so organic and natural and grown up. Right. And I wanted to know, how how was I going to get from my hands are at 2 and I got to remember to look at this mirror and I got to look and oh, I got to be pushing with my foot. How does it all get to that point? And it didn't feel like it ever would.
Right, but it does.
Yeah.
But the driving example is a great example because it doesn't get to that point accidentally. It gets to that point because you practice putting all those things together a lot. If you repeatedly practice one driving behavior at a time and that's all you ever practice, you never would get good at driving. The reason why you get good at it is because you practice putting it all together. So let's say, an example from teaching basic skills in ABA might be we hold up a stimulus like this and we teach the child to label its features. So maybe we say, what is it? And we teach the child to say cup. What do you do with it? You drink. What color is it? It's red, etc. Right? But that's not good enough. That's all sort of the memorization of the basic skills. The way to make sure that it actually gets generalized and applied in the child's natural life is to now, on a daily basis, every time you're hanging out with your kid and there's a cup around, model different types of behavior with respect to the cup and ask your child to do different types of behavior with the cup. So for example, you could ask him, will you hand me the cup please? Or I'm thirsty, will you hand me that? Or ask him to give it to the doll that he's playing with, or etc. Just
or can you put the doll in the cup?
Exactly. Right. And so it's a matter of putting it all together in the course of your natural daily life, and it's a constant process. And honestly, if you really want to make your kid have the best outcomes possible, it's a process that should be happening during all waking hours. Yeah. From the time the child wakes up to the time they go to sleep, it's an opportunity to learn and it's an opportunity to generalize. Yeah. And it never ends.
Yeah, I remember when they were working on readings and salutations with Jem, and he had the thing that he knew somebody came in the room, he was supposed to look at them and say hello, but the practice of it in real time, it wasn't happening, and so I had the assignment that I had to take him to 5 stores a day and encourage the person who was the cashier to talk to him and then prompt him through responding, and I thought, he's never going to get to the point where he automatically talks to them, and of course he did. But 5 times a day I had to go to different stores.
It takes a lot of practice, but not repeated practice at the same time. It takes practice across multiple environments, multiple settings, different people, different objects.
Cashiers.
Exactly. So it's the same thing. Now, your listener had a second part to her question too, which is I usually say the research says 2+ years of intensive ABA, and she's asking how much is the plus, right?
How much is the plus?
In other words, where's the end in sight, right? Well, and the short answer, which is always kind of the same, and that is it depends on the kid, and it depends on a lot of different factors. The very fastest that we see a child being completely done, let's say they completely catch up to typical development and they just don't need ABA at all anymore, the very fastest might be a year. That's very uncommon though. Okay. That would be probably less than 5%. I'm just making that number up off the top of my head, but it's not terribly common. Most kids are going to need 2 or more years. Totally depends on the child. Some kids benefit from up to 4 years, gradually fading out in intensity to where maybe in the last year you're only doing a couple hours a week of just kind of follow-up to make sure that they've got everything down. So you really honestly don't know. It totally depends. Every year though of treatment you can ask for some kind of assessment or evaluation to see kind of how far behind are we still and how much more does my child have to learn. So it really depends, but it could easily be between 2 and 4 years.
My thing that I always say to parents is think of it like college. Sign up for the 4-year plan. Some kids it takes 5 years to go to college and some kids finish sooner. But sign up mentally for the 4-year plan, get your house in order for the 4-year plan, and you can reevaluate it every year. But that's what I mentally signed up for, and it took us 5 years, and that was okay. I wouldn't take any minute of that back, but it is disruptive. I'm sure your life is upended in this first year. You're saying to yourself, when am I going to be done? But it will settle down for you. You will watch a little bit of the A Word to see what they were saying in the first year about, well, when are we going to get to this? When are we going to get to the point where he can sit at the table and eat with us and do this? And when are we going to get to the point where and then watch into the second year where you see everybody kind of takes a breath and goes, okay, this is what we're doing and it's working. The first year is the hardest. I really believe that.
And the truth is, you never have an answer to the question, when are we going to get to X? That question will never be answered. But what you can always know is how are we going to maximize my child's development so we can get a little further than we are today?
Yeah,
that question is always fairly clear. It's okay, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and that is going to push my child's skills a little bit further than he's currently at.
I got to get to this other question because we're almost out of time. Hi, Shannon and Dr. Tarbox. Thanks for the wonderful show. Are there any predictors for the language development of ASD kids? My son, age 10, communicates in 2 to 3 words most of the time. For some needs, he uses full sentences such as, Mom, I want to go to the restroom, I want to sleep, etc. Other times, we just keep reminding him to use full sentences, and he echoes us. I know we don't have a crystal ball, though I wish we had one, but I would like to know if there's any research on the language development for older kids, for 10-year-olds. I also would like to know what could be done to enhance his language. Thanks a ton. And you've got about 1.5 minutes.
Okay.
I know,
no
it's
problem.
cruel. It's cruel. And maybe we talk more about this next week, but go.
Right. So the short answer is I'm not aware of any research that that actually will give you a clear answer as to how to predict your child's language development, whether they're a 2-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 20-year-old. So the short answer is no, not really. There isn't any clear research. However, again, back to the general ABA principle of wherever our skill level is today in human development, whether you're on or off the spectrum, it can be a little bit further tomorrow. We can get a little bit better at whatever we do. You name it, whether it's sports, the arts, whether it's, your social skills, whether it's stuff we're teaching kids on the spectrum, anything you do, you can get a little bit better at, right? There is a maximum limit of potential someday, right? We're not all going to be Albert Einstein. We're not all going to be Michael Jordan, right?
We can't all be in the Olympics.
Right, we're not all going to be in the Olympics, right? So there is some maximum at some point. However, no one can tell you what the maximum is for your child. You know for sure this one thing. The maximum is more than we're at today, okay?
There you go.
And that, reasonably is going to continue to be the case forever. That is how it works, And so there are a lot of things you can do to continue to foster your child's language development. Probably the best thing at 10-year-olds up through adolescent is going to be sort of a natural environment training approach, which is where you provide many opportunities for practice of increasing language slightly in the course of your child's natural life. And so it sounds like they're doing that already. They're trying to encourage him to use longer sentences and so forth. And so that's exactly what I would recommend. The challenge is fading out the prompting, because otherwise, like they're saying, it sounds like maybe their kid has learned, okay, I just have to repeat whatever my parents say, and then when I get what I want.
Right.
And so what you do is you gradually fade out the prompting, and you require him to respond without help, without prompting, in order to get what he wants, basically. And so that's the minute-long version of it. There's a lot more resources. I know you've talked about natural environment training quite a bit on your show. There's a lot more resources out there that we can point folks towards.
And maybe that's something we can talk about more next week about building language skills, regardless of what age on the autism spectrum. Okay, we are unfortunately out of time, but we thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you here. And I want to just remind everybody that we'll be back next week. We will have Alex Plank with us on Tuesday, and in our last week of this Blog-A-Rama, we have some amazing bloggers who are going to be with us talking about their individual view of this autism spectrum and how they're sharing it through their blogs. So make sure that you tune in for that. We will have Matt Asner on Tuesday. We will have Dr. Doreen Grampachet on Wednesday. We've got a really exciting guest for you during Let's Talk Autism, but we're out of time, Emily says. So we'll see you next week. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.